Coming to you from the big island of Hawaii, it's the Songs and Stories Podcast. And now, here's your host, Steve Roby.
Aloha and welcome to another episode of the Songs and Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Roby, and joining me online today, on the phone today, online on the phone, it's all the same thing now these days, is legendary blues guitarist Bob Margolin. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thanks so much. I can't wait to get there in person.
All right, we're waiting for you. Hey, you got a show coming up at Gertrude's Jazz Bar in Kona, Saturday, July 23rd. The show starts at 7 p.m. and tickets are available online. I'll put a link to the tickets in this podcast show description, and folks can pick up tickets there. So, Bob, let's start out with a brief overview of your career. Tell me some highlights.
Well, I started playing guitar in the mid-1960s, inspired by Chuck Berry. I had a guitar around the house. My younger sister was starting to take lessons, but I was hearing Chuck Berry on the radio, and I wanted to play like him. I followed the path of his inspiration back to Muddy Waters and Chicago blues. And as soon as I heard that on a college radio station, I fell in deep, and I haven't crawled out yet. Mm-hmm. Muddy Waters became my favorite musician. I heard him on the radio, and I heard that big voice, and I go, wow, listen to that. There's all this depth and power and blues in it. And then I listened a little further and said, wow, and he's got a great slide guitar player with him, too. Turns out it was the same guy. And so I'd been in rock bands for a while, and then I started to gravitate towards being in blues bands by the late 60s and early 1970s. We opened some shows for Muddy Waters, and he was really nice to me because he could see I was playing the same kind of music as him, which was old school Chicago blues, as he called it. He was nice to me over that, which was an incredible thrill since he was my absolute favorite musician. It's like if somebody liked British pop music, it'd be like the Beatles being nice to him.
Did he happen to show you any of his techniques or special things?
No, at the beginning, he was just very encouraging to me. And one night I came down to one of his shows. I was the first one in the place. First person I saw was his harmonica player, George Mojo Dreamy-Eyed Good-Looking Buford. He said, oh, Muddy just fired one of the other guitar players last night. Wait here. And Muddy came out and he saw me. He knew I liked to play his style of music. And he said, come to my hotel room tomorrow, bring a guitar. He said, play it. And I started to play just old school Chicago blues. Mm-hmm. And then Muddy started to sing along with it, which was certainly the biggest musical thrill up till that time.
Oh, my gosh.
But the first of many more to come from being around him. He gave me a chance to be in the band, and it put me on the road I'm still riding.
All right. Hey, you also appear with him in the film, the classic film, The Last Waltz. What was that like?
Well, that was a real thrill for me. I had a subscription to Rolling Stone magazine, and I knew who the rock stars of the day were, and they were all around us. Muddy had done an album with Levon Helm and Garth Hudson from the band. And that was in 1975. And in 1976, when they had that big Last Waltz show in San Francisco that was like a farewell concert.
Yeah.
They invited Muddy, and Muddy invited me and the piano player that we had, Pontop Perkins, who was even older than Muddy. He was born in 1913. Muddy was born in 1915. But as you might imagine, those guys from that time, they were already in their 60s. They didn't know who the rock stars of the day were. But I was 27 when The Last Waltz happened, so I did. So there were all these people around us. Me and Pine Top were sitting in the green room, and he's just looking around him at all these people. And he said to me, "Somebody told me one of the Beatles is here," and he didn't realize that Ringo was sitting on the other side of him, who heard it, and he probably enjoyed not being recognized for once.
Mm-hmm.
Muddy had a beautiful woman come up to him, impossibly beautiful blonde woman, and so to thank him for his music, so he naturally hit on her. She happened to be Joni Mitchell,
Yeah.
and she backed out of it graciously, but. I knew who these people were, but Muddy and them didn't.
Mm. Besides working with Muddy Waters, is there any other particular show that stands out in your memory as one of the classic shows that comes up when you think about it?
Actually, I would have to say, to go back to what you were already talking about, the Last Waltz was actually Muddy's most visible moment,
Mm.
even though he's a blues legend and in the very top of human achievement as far as being a blues musician. The only person that might be more famous than him would be B.B. King. But even with all that, being in a movie that's kind of still known as the world's greatest documentary concert movie,
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
and seen by all those people that got him seen more than anything else ever did.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and certainly for me too, I was standing right next to him, and it turned out that one of the cameras was broken. They just had one camera on Muddy zooming in and out, and since I happened to be standing right next to him, I was in every scene.
Nice.
It wasn't me trying to steal the show or anything
Yeah.
like that. It's just where I was standing and the camera that they had.
Let's talk about your upcoming show at Gertrude's in Kona on July 23rd. It's a Saturday. Who else will you be performing with on stage? You mentioned Colin John earlier. Will he be there?
Yes, he sure will, and he's multi-continental. I mean, he has a place in Ohio. He spends a lot of time in Hawaii too, and he's just an amazing musician for all kinds of roots music. Certainly knows a lot more about Hawaiian music than I do, and we will be adding his great guitar playing and singing to the mix, along with his wife, Long Tall Deb, who is a great musician herself, and gentleman that lives there now, John Rakapo, who is a guitar player and singer in rock and blues bands, mostly around Hawaii, but he comes to the States sometimes too. We
Huh.
have done a show together like this before in Memphis before, you know what happened, and we really had a ball. And we this is the third time that we're trying to get me out there, and the first time that it's going to happen without it having to be canceled.
All right, yeah, and I understand there's a couple local musicians too on stage. Noah Eads, I believe, is on drums, and Jocelyn Michelle is going to be there too.
Yeah, Jocelyn plays organ. I think we're gonna have a ball with those folks.
Yeah, that's going to be a packed stage.
Well, I don't think we'll all be up for every song.
Okay.
We'll take the opportunity to do a few where that might be just me solo or just Colin and Deb. But we'll put it together in many different kinds of combinations and make an entertaining show out of it and throw in some good stories too.
Good, good. Are you going to be playing any new material? Are you working on any new material?
Well, I have a new album that was just released in June. That's a acoustic duo with a great harmonic player from Phoenix named Bob Corritor. And it's mostly traditional blues, but we kind of venture into, I guess, what would be called Americana or folk as well. And but it is just acoustic and usually two people at a time, though we have a special guest, Jimmy Vivino, on two of the songs.
Sounds good.
And that's just been released and is getting a lot of airplay on blues stations.
All right. So what does the rest of the year look like for you?
Well, there's I have shows in the summer and in the early fall, a lot of gigs that are blues oriented, some festivals. There's a few that are involved with that older piano player who didn't know who Ringo was. His name Pine-Top Perkins, and he lived to be 97 years old. And there's a foundation that his manager started to help fulfill the wish of young musicians that want to learn about blues music. It's called the Pine-Top Perkins Foundation, and I'll be doing some events that have to do with that in early August and in October. But then at the end of the year, I think November and into December, there will be a tour that is a celebration of the last waltz, but it's not like a tribute band. It's some of today's greatest Americana musicians who get together and play music that was in the last waltz, but they interpret it their own way. We've got Warren Haynes and Don Was and Jamie Johnson, who's a country music star. When we played in New Orleans in May, we had all kinds of wonderful people. Horn section, John Medeski on keyboards. All kinds of really amazing musicians. Grace Potter was on that one. She was just fantastic.
Wow. That sounds like an interesting show. Well, let's remind our listeners that you'll be appearing a week from Saturday, July 23rd at 7 p.m. at Gertrude's Jazz Bar in Kona, just a couple of steps up. And what a view. I don't know if you ever played there before, but it's an open air venue with great views of the sunset. I think you'll have a great time there.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I'm looking forward to it so much.
All right, Bob, thanks so much for your time today. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Songs and Stories podcast. Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. We'll see you next week on Songs and Stories. Aloha.